So here we are, joined today by PJ Black, formerly known as Justin Gabriel. He's here today to talk about the Money in the Bank 2011 from Chicago. But before we get into that, hello PJ, how you doing?
I'm doing good, guys. Thanks for having me. That was
Thanks for coming
2011.
on.
I'm trying to remember that match.
I, I did wonder that. I thought, I'll ask PJ what he thought of the match. And I was like, would he even remember this match? But we've watched it, so we're going to be able to prompt
Prime
you
you with
and
good
everything
questions,
else.
hopefully.
And everything else. I guess my first question. So, this sort of Money in the Bank match, I mean, they used to do it at WrestleMania, then they turned it into a whole pay per view. I feel like knowing you and obviously watching you wrestle, having wrestled you a bunch of times, like this sort of match seems to fit your style. That being said, do you enjoy these type of matches, or is it something you kind of dread? Or are you like, oh, this is a good chance for me to be creative? Like,
Yes, I mean, as wrestlers, we're artists, right? We want to like show off our we express ourselves by the stuff we do, and this is a perfect match where we can like come up with all kinds of crazy stuff that you can't come up with in a normal match. I love matches like this. Obviously, or I used to, not so much anymore as I get older. It's just it was tough in that controlled environment. You know what it's like at TV, right? That you're limited of things you can do. You can pitch all these things, and they might go with some of them. I remember pitching hundreds of different spots, and we ended up going with one or two, and it has to make sense, right? You got to because how many guys are on there? Eight. How many guys?
eight guys, yeah.
Eight guys, and they all have spots, so we got to try and make it all work. So it's a very unique concept, and it was a fun time.
Well, because there's some big, like, there's a lot of big hitters in this match. I think Kane's in the match, Sheamus, Wade Barrett, your boy Heath's in the match, Daniel Bryan, a whole bunch of guys. This is a question I was going to ask. You said about it being like a controlled environment. This might be a bit too inside baseball, but can you remember about how, like, how, with the WWE, how do they make you put a match together like this? Are they making you do like rehearsals during the week, or is it a case of on the day you're there, or?
Yeah, back in the day, we were so busy, we didn't have time for rehearsals, right? Sometimes for
Right.
Mania, you might have time for rehearsals, but like stuff like this, it was just on the day.
Yeah. Oh, really?
It was a pretty easy one too, if you look at it. It looks like it's so complicated, but it was really easy.
Well, I think it's one of those things. Like, there's eight guys. It's kind of like if you all do kind of two big spots, then that's a lot of stuff in a match. You know what I mean? There's eight of you, so there's
I,
16
I do remember
spots.
actually this one coming together much quicker than any other match that I've ever been a part of. You know, like
Oh, really?
yeah, you know, like sometimes it can drag out. You sit there all day. Like everyone had bounce ideas, and they're like, "Okay, we're going to use that one. We're going to use that one. Nope, not use that one. Let's stick it all together." And I think we were done. I think I was in catering, but before 1 o'clock that day.
Oh, well, it's funny because it's a pretty. I don't know if you remember, but it's a pretty long match as well. It's like nearly half an hour long. I want to say.
Yep,
Is it
yep.
that long? Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
no, 24, 25 minutes. Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Eight
like,
entrances.
yeah, that's true. That's
Yeah.
true. And at this point, you'd been in. This is 2011, so you'd been in the WWE for how long?
Uh, 3 years.
3 years, and then main roster,
Two years on the main roster, maybe.
because this was after Nexus, right?
Right after Nexus, yeah. And
And like, here's a question I had. So you got thrown in the Nexus angle. Did they really give you much sort of direction in terms of like your character and your gimmick, or did you just kind of leave it to yourself?
after Nexus,
Yeah, or even just coming into Nexus, because that was your debut on the main roster, right?
yeah. So we did NXT season one, remember?
Hmm.
And then
Yeah.
we kind of went home after that, and we're like, "Oh, okay, what's gonna happen?" And we all got called to TV in Miami that week, not knowing what to expect, and we all got called into Vince's office, and then we laid out the Nexus thing, and we all kind of looked at each other. We're like, "Oh, okay." You know, in wrestling, what's old is new, and what's new is old. Or everything is just recycled. So you can usually
Right.
go back to a storyline or era or something similar and kind of get notes and ideas from that and work off that. But there was nothing to look back at this except for like NWO stuff. But we're rookies, so we're not really like NWO or like a faction like DX. So we all kind of like we didn't know what to do or what to expect. So we kind of just did whatever we thought, and Vince would give us like little inputs, and that's what we came up with.
Right. Well, because they kind of threw you in the deep end, because it's not like, I guess they kind of presented you guys as rookies, but you were instantly kind of in there with the top guys, right? Like working with that kind of main event scene.
Yeah, that was incredible too. Like just working main event loops and matches and like working like 3 garden matches in the main event. I was like, wow, my first year, I was like, wow, this is great.
Well, the only reason I ask about the character stuff is because obviously I was watching that Money in the Bank. You look obviously so different compared to you do now. Like you're like,
I know.
no beard, no hair, just you look very pretty back then. I mean, you do still now, but just very pretty boy. Amazing tad. You're wearing like the little trunks and stuff. I don't know. It's kind of fun for me to watch.
I know. You know how many people like come up to me and be like, "Oh shit, I didn't even realize you were that guy."
Really?
Yeah.
That's so funny. So, like, I know Sam has a question he wants to get to you. Just like, and obviously, I want to talk to you about the 450 off the ladder. But before I get to that, the one thing I actually think my favorite moment of this match, I don't know if you remember it, but you set up a ladder or you're climbing a ladder, but it's not below the briefcase. It's kind of to the side of the ring. So you have the ladder and you start to like hop and jump kind of towards the middle. I thought that was tremendous.
Thank you. I actually had a really cool spot because I can hop all kinds of stuff and I can do 360s with a ladder. I was gonna do a whole thing like a sequence, I guess, but it got kiboshed.
I would have. I wanted to see more because you started hopping and like the crowd starts reacting and I think someone comes and drop kicks you off. I'm like, no, that could have been great. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I'll still do that. Next one I do of those.
yeah,
That one,
it's all
I haven't seen anyone do it yet.
it's all the hopping experience from being the bunny rabbit.
Funny.
Huh?
Exactly.
Sam, you had some questions, right?
Yeah, so this pay-per-view was like hot out of the gate. Many times on the show when we review a pay-per-view, it's really important for me as a viewer for the first match of the night to be a banger because I just feel like it kind of sets the tone, right? Many times we've watched something and the first match of the night has been a dud and then we're just kind of soured, even regardless of what happens next. Does that mindset transfer over to you as a performer as well? Did that ever cross your mind? That
Yes.
your
Yes.
actions are going to be the first thing that people see on this night?
Yep. And it's a subconscious thing for people who haven't been in the business for that long. But I mean, I run shows too. If you're a promoter, one of the first things you do, you book 2 main events. One is the main event and one is the opener because it sets the pace for the whole day. And the shows where you said that it was a dud, sometimes it can just be like the match, there was no chemistry, or maybe it was something completely wrongly booked, or maybe they had no other choice. But usually you'll see if you go to a WWE live event, they'll start off with a bang every single time.
Yeah. I think if you're a wrestler, it's funny because I think the old sort of perspective was, oh, I want to be in the main event. And I feel like this generation is like, I just want to be on first, be the first match.
Yeah. I mean, it is the most fun. Think about it, bro. Like,
Yeah.
it's the most fun.
I love being on first. Put me on first every night of the week.
The audience have to be like fresh as well, right? They're energetic, ready to go.
Totally. And they always are. Like, when we do those WWE tours, like around the world, like some places have been wrestling for so long. So that first match is very crucial, I was telling you guys earlier off air, like I was in Jamaica last week, and it was the first time in like 50 years they had matches. So they've never seen like bumping and stuff. So like the first match goes on and they were hot, but until that first bump happened, they exploded. So you're always trying to like structure the match slightly different when you're in that first match too.
Well, I think it's also worth noting, I don't want to tread on Sam's toes because I think I know one of his questions, but not only are you on first, because obviously when you're on wrestling shows, you're constantly trying to follow the previous matches, but there's also, I don't know if you remember this, PJ, but there's also another Money in the Bank match on this show. Sam, you had a question about that, right?
Yeah, so I just think that you're in a unique position on this pay-per-view in that you're the only match that has a direct competitor, in that there's another Money in the Bank ladder match later on, but for Raw. Is there a level of like competitiveness there? Even doesn't even have to be like overt, but even just like inside yourself, being like, oh, as long as I'm better than the other match, like what goes on in your mind with something like that?
Massively. Even especially back then, I remember we were all fighting, not fighting, but we were like, ours is going to be so much better than yours. Like,
right. Yeah. That's so the one thing I touched up on, like, just for anyone that hasn't seen this show or hasn't seen it in a long time, there's a spot in the match where me try and describe this best, or maybe you could describe it, PJ. I'm not sure, but basically, you have a ladder which is flat on top of the top rope, kind of
Laid
in
out
the corner.
horizontally. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you stand on the ladder, which is impressive in itself,
Right.
and then hit the 450 off the ladder and sort of picture perfect hit it. It looked like it should be a complete disaster to do, and it's funny because I know later in the show, Matt Sydal or Evan Bourne does like a shooting star off a ladder, and I think people, I know that got like replayed and maybe added into like the hype videos and stuff. But to me, I thought like this 450 off the ladder on top of the ropes was like by far the most dangerous spot and just the most impressive that you actually managed to pull it off, because you stood there and it's WWE is not cables either, it's ropes, so you're like bouncing on the spot as it is anyway before you hit the 450. Like, what do you remember about that?
I mean, it was actually 100 times more difficult than it looked.
No, it looked so difficult.
Yeah.
It was incredibly difficult. And the hardest part, I mean, it wasn't so much the bouncy, it was getting my feet right. I kind of used the bounce to my advantage. That's why I kind of like went with it. The hardest thing was there was a ladder there and there was something there. So I had a limited space to move in. Because usually with a 450, you can either go up and then come down, or if I want to make it impactful, I can kind of just whip my body around and make the splash. But I couldn't do that, right? So you can see if you look at the replay too, like I go really slow and I do it way different, and I move at an angle too. It was kind of like doing it in a confined space. Like I don't know if they say that on commentary or when I got to the back, but I remember someone saying, "Wow, that's like doing a 450 in a phone booth."
Right? Yeah. I just don't understand. Like, I feel like even if the ladder was like stuck to the ropes, it would still be hard. But the fact that it's just lent on there, I just don't understand how the ladder didn't sweep from underneath you. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I also made it dramatic and made it look like I was unstable. I did that on purpose. Like I think I practiced it one time because Kane wasn't sure. He took it right. He wasn't sure. He was like, "Oh, I don't know. Just don't kill me." And I was like, "Swap out the crash pad. I'll put it there." And I kind of just stood on it and I did it in the ring. And then he was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And I was like, "Yeah, should be easy." Like, back then when you're young, you have so much confidence.
Well, I thought that's the thing that would make me nervous is I've never wrestled with Kane before, but you've got Kane there taking it. Like, were you not worried about killing Kane?
I mean, I'm pretty confident in my abilities, like I do this. I've been doing that 450 from different angles. I can hit it anywhere in the ring since I was like 14 years old. I started before that. I started practicing it into the swimming pool, and then I started doing it from the balcony. And my dad lived in a 3-story house, and I started doing it from the roof.
Oh no!
50-foot cliffs in Hawaii. Like I have so much control over that. And anything else, not so much, but that thing.
Right. Yeah. No, it's funny because I feel like the 450 is one of the more underrated moves in wrestling, because you see a handful of guys do it. Like, I feel like the 450 is so difficult to do because I can flip from the top rope onto my feet, and I can flip to the top rope, off the top rope onto my knees, but to get flat, really, really struggle with. And like having wrestling, I've wrestled you a bunch. Now, I'll be honest with you. So I've took the 450 from you a bunch of times, and you're like a way bigger guy, I think, than people probably give you credit for, mainly because you wrestled in the WWE at the time where everyone was ginormous. So, you're wrestling guys like Kane and Sheamus or whatever. But I do remember specifically one time I was wrestling you, and you giving me the 450, but the springboard version. And I'm just laying there and I'm thinking, oh man, this is going to suck. And you're rotating over, and I just kind of watch your knee just coming towards me, and I'm just laying there praying that it doesn't touch my face. And sure enough, it just goes whoop, right past me. You land on me perfect, no problem at all. But every time I'm just like, oh man, this is scary. Because you see a lot of guys do that. Like, I've never seen you mess up the 450 or hurt anyone with it. And you see quite a lot. You see guys like landing knees heavy on the guy or on the legs or whatever else. So like, you definitely have that down big time.
Yeah, it's so weird too, because a lot of people, everyone does it different, and when they do it, it just looks like they like just fall on the guy. Like I try to make it look like a splash, where I like that impact, which I don't know. Maybe there's those little things for me that makes it.
Yeah, that totally. I do have. I don't know if you remember this, because I assume WWE is quite secretive with their finishes and stuff. So Brian Danielson, he won this match. Do you guys remember when you found that out? Was it like in advance, or did they keep it to last minute, or?
Sure, I don't remember that one. It might have been on the day, but like nobody really cared. We were so tired. Like we just worked like 40 shows in a row. Like we just wanted to go after that.
That's so funny. You do that long ass tour, and it's like, oh, we're gonna end the tour with, well, not even ending, but just like a 8-man ladder match.
Yep.
Here's another. Again, you don't have to answer this, but because I know back in, I don't know how it is now in WWE, but I know back then, obviously the pay-per-view payoffs are kind of a big thing for the guys. You're in the match here. It's a big match, but there's 8 of you. Did you get a good payoff for this? Is it significant, or?
Yeah, I got a good check for that. That was back then when the video game checks were pretty big too, and the pay-per-views. This was right before they started streaming stuff. I remember when we were in the meeting and they were like, "Oh, we're gonna go to the streaming thing," and the first thing I could think of, I was like, "Oh, there goes all the royalties," because I used to make so much money from the DVD sales. Like even I remember getting a check and I was like, "What is this for? This is a massive check," and it was me being in the background of the Chris Jericho DVD. I wasn't even in the DVD. I was like in the background. I was like, wow, this is great. And a lot of those royalties kind of went away after this streaming stuff.
Do you still get any royalties now from them, or is it just like really significant?
I mean, it's minuscule. What's the word?
Yeah.
It's
minuscule.
Because it kind of goes the way down. I think last year that was probably my last one.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Taking it back to the 450 splash, it was obviously really cool, but it was also kind of in service of the story because you were working on Kane all night, which makes sense because he's like the biggest threat, right? Like literally. So you work on Kane all night. And if you're going to have to take out a big guy like that, he's got to go out in style, right? So it serves the story as well as it being really awesome and flashy. But earlier on and I feel like Marty said, everyone's going to remember the 450 splash, but a lot earlier on in the match, you do the spot where you dive out somersault onto Kane, who's on the outside. And for me, like I like that almost as much as the 450 splash, just for its simplicity and its efficacy. Do you have any like memories of that spot as well? Because I would be more worried about that going wrong than I would the 450 splash.
Yeah, I do actually. I got a massive argument with him. I was thinking about that the other day. I think the best catchers in the business are people that do dive, and he's a big guy, so he doesn't dive. So I was trying to explain to him how to make this, hurt less for both of us and make it look cool. And he was like, "No, I'm just gonna stand far back and then I'll step in when the time is right." I'm like, "No, that's not how it works." Like, I hate that when you go to a training school and people say that too. Like, "Yeah, just stand back here and you step in." I'm like, "No, that's not how wrestling works." Fuck. So I remember I was like, "Yo, just watch some Evan Bourne matches or stuff." I said to him, and he kind of just looked at me like that. And I was like, "Oh, well, let's see what happens."
So when you're in the ring, you're running out to go over the top rope. You know in the back of your mind that he's not going to be where you want him to be.
Oh yeah, I was like,
I've just got to do it.
Yep, pretty much.
I didn't want to bring that up, but he didn't catch you very good at all.
No.
Kinda,
and if any young wrestlers watch this, you can never step in. Be too close. You can always do that. That's so much easier than stepping in. Like, fuck. I don't know why that's so hard to understand.
Did you like working with? Other than that, that was actually one of my questions. Did you like working with Kane?
I did. Me and Heath, when we were tag champs, we actually worked Kane and Big Show on like 3 different loops. Imagine we worked them in, with those Europe loops we do. We used to do like 25 shows in 25 days in 5 different countries. We worked them every night, and it was actually so easy. It was super fun.
I can imagine it being, I just like, it's just someone I've never come across the whole time I've been wrestling. So I just thought like that would be.
Yeah, because it's different structured matches because these are legit 2 giants. It's like, what are we gonna do with these guys, right? Like it's like kick and punch, and then just take some choke slams, and then that's about it.
So yeah, I guess so. I guess you take the big pump. So I know you've probably told this story before, PJ, but Sam probably has not heard it, and you've told me it a couple of times. It's one of my favorite stories. Can you just tell us the story about how you end up leaving WWE? Because it's one of my favorites.
Sure. I gotta think back. So, like, when you don't get used on TV, you just sit in catering, and it gets really boring. So, I think I started booking my flights home early as soon as the show started. So I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna go home a day early. And I started going home a day early. And we were in Austin, Texas, and there was a skydiving place. So I was like, oh, cool, I'm gonna go fucking do some jumps. And I left the building because I was like, I'm not being used. No one's gonna even miss me. So I did a couple of jumps. And I remember getting back to the arena, and the goggles was really tight, so I had the goggle print on me. And I remember Seth Rollins looked at me like this. He goes, "Did you just go jump out of a plane?" And I was like, so I went home, I booked the flight, and on my connecting flight, they called me. They're like, "Hey, we need you for this lumberjack match." And I was like, "I'll just tell them I quit. Bye."
Jesus. Any regrets with that at all? Or you were cool with it?
I mean, I wish I handled it a little bit differently. I wish I thought about it a little bit more. And I wish they did call me the next week. They're like, "Yo, just stay home a week, think about this, and then we can negotiate, talk about something. We know you're not happy, whatever." And I was just like, at that time, I was ready to do some indies, because I've never done the indies in the US, so I was kind of like ready for that adventure. So I was just like, I had my mind made up. I'm gonna step away from my dream job.
Right. You had a pretty long run there though in total, right?
Yeah, it was like 5-6 years. It was fun.
Oh, I thought it was longer, but that's still a long time. Yeah.
I mean, that's like on TV. There was a little bit, with FCW and developmental
Right.
and all that. Plus, it took them like over a year to get my papers to work in the US.
Oh, of course. Yeah. That is a pain in the ass.
When I got to the US, I got back pay for all that because I got paid from the day I signed. I was like, "Oh shit, that is cool."
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Oh wow, that's great. God damn. I guess actually, just last question. So this show is in Chicago. That there's this whole thing with like Punk did the pipe bomb at this time, and then he wins the world title and stuff. Were you tight with Punk back in the day or during this period?
I don't think anybody's tied with Punk. He has some acquaintances, and he always gives people shit. He's not a bully, but he's always that guy, I remember giving him some good because before WWE I was a nutritionist, so I remember giving him some nutritional advice, and then he came back to me and I told him something else, and he's like, "Wow, you're way smarter than you look." So he never kind of like bullied me or cared about. He was never like a dick to me like he was to everyone else. Like he was just like, "Wow, I can get some info from that guy or whatever."
Right. That's funny. Well, I really appreciate your time, PJ. It's good to see you again. Do you have
This is
anything
awesome.
you want to plug or anything you got coming up? I know you mentioned about potential podcast coming soon, maybe, or
Yeah, maybe the podcast. I have a few things. I've been running this Arcade Mania shows. I don't know if you guys have followed that.
they look awesome. Yeah, tell us about them.
Yeah, so it's just a video game. Here's the machine we use.
Yes, that's
Oh,
awesome.
nice.
Yeah, we got the old school Mortal Kombat. We just love old school games. Everyone's into these new games. I'm not a gamer or anything, but I like the classics. So we kind of like just created this brand where it's something different. Like we have like wrestlers. It's like an ultimate meet and greet actually. So we have wrestlers in the tournament, and then fans can buy in. And then for an extra fee, you can get your own entrance song and like hoodies. Very gimmicky and it's fun. We have a belt made. And I won the first one because I'm actually really good with Mortal Kombat. So everyone thought it was rigged. So at the second event, I let all the fans line up, and I just whipped them one by one. And we just had our last one in Hollywood a couple of weeks ago, probably a month ago, and we had our first match on it because usually it's just the arcade stuff. And we had a match where I wrestled mini like 25 Cent.
I saw this. What was that? What was that? We were talking about micro wrestling last week on the pod. He's a micro wrestler, right?
He's a micro wrestler. Yeah, I dropped the title to him. It was a fun match. I haven't edited the video yet, but I'll upload it soon on my IG. It was a fun one. It was a good one. People were nuts, dude. Like, and we had all these movie props. We had the sugar glass, like whiskey bottles, and like guitars and keyboards. It was a fans bring weapons match because it has to match the gimmick of the show, right? So it's 8-bit wrestling. We call it 8-bit wrestling. So people brought in like like Guitar Hero thing, like game controllers for weapons and stuff. It was fun.
Damn, I'd love to see that. Yeah, please upload the footage. I'd love to check it out. And because where can we find you on your socials, PJ?
IG PJ450. PJBlack.com is the website. I think it might be down right now. I gotta fix that this week. But yeah, I'm pretty active on IG and then also on Twitter. Twitter is Darewolf333.
Awesome. Well, PJ, so good to see you again. I miss you. I'm glad you're doing well. Glad to see you doing so well. We're looking as scrumptious as ever, if I say so myself, and muscly as well. What have you not got? You make me jealous. But yeah, it's great to see you, and thank you so much for coming on the pod. We really appreciate it.
It was great.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much
Awesome.
for having me, guys.
Thank you, PJ.